Hello, my name is Lee Presser. This is my show. I speak frequently to very interesting people. Some of these conversations are so exciting, so intellectually stimulating, I thought others might like to listen in. This is the reason we started recording Conversation with Lee Presser.
Welcome to Conversation with Lee Presser. My guest today is Dr. Robert Daiber, Regional Superintendent of Schools for Madison County, Illinois. This is his third appearance. Dr. Daiber is here today to discuss current education issues. These issues include more effective methods of transferring knowledge to students, physical classroom conditions, and funding the education process. We'll also be discussing the role of the regional superintendent and why the regional superintendents became the target of Illinois Governor Quinn's line item veto. Dr. Robert Diaber, welcome to Conversation.
Thank you, Lee. So it's good to be here.
Let's just start with the story of, and you and I have had this conversation over a number of months, and this conversation until it got settled, and you tell me that it got settled yesterday. And by the way, yesterday was June the 25th. People are saying this later on, but I want them to get some idea so they're not confused like when you say yesterday. There was a funding for regional superintendents which Governor Quinn vetoed and caused a real problem. So why don't you start with what it was that he vetoed, why he vetoed it, and what happened in the interim.
Okay. A year ago, on June 30th, the governor chose to line item veto the salaries for the regional superintendents and their assistants.
So you are paid by the state, not by the county?
We were paid by the state of Illinois. We were part of the state budget.
Okay.
Because that was to be paid for through the general revenue fund of the state. In a result of that, there was numerous actions that followed, and one was an unpleasant set of events which involved hearings in the courts because we were directed that we should appeal this to the court system. The court upheld the governor's veto because they had indicated the legislative process had not taken full course, which meant that we had through fall veto session, which ended on November 10th, in which the legislation was passed then finally to pay us, which began a long process of then justifying why in veto session representatives and senators should look at regional superintendents, their importance in the process of education, and then pass the proper legislation to grant us compensation. Mm-hmm. The hardship that was felt was that regional superintendents and their assistants went 6 months with no compensation or delayed wages until we then finally were paid in December for our back pay, which in result then was paid in a lump sum, which was looked at as one large paycheck, and much more taxes were taken out. So some of us just in our tax refunds got our full compensation this past month, which was the refunds. So also as part of that legislation, it required a Streamline task force to examine these regional offices to see if they were really important.
How many regional offices are there in the state?
There are currently 44.
44.
So the task force...
So the state is divided into 44 districts.
That is correct.
And you're one of these 44.
We are in Regional Office 41 in Madison County. Okay. So the Streamline task force examined the duties and the responsibilities of the regional offices and of the State Board of Education this past spring. That task force was made up of legislators and representatives from the educational communities. It concluded in March that yes, these offices need to be kept in place. They need to be held by an elected official. So Senator Bill Hayne, who I commend for championing this legislation, then moved forward which became law yesterday, Senate Bill 2706. But part of this legislation said that services probably could be done more effective if we increased the population capacity of these regions from 43,000 inhabitants to 61,000. Mm-hmm. And which then Forest.
So that draws in, it sounds like it draws in more school districts
It
than
does.
How many districts do you manage today?
13.
How many will you manage under the new scheme?
Our number will not change because of the fact that our population in Madison County is about 296,000 inhabitants. But in regions of Illinois, such as in deep southern Illinois, south of Mount Vernon, or in west central Illinois, like the Galesburg area, you'll see greater number of school districts brought into regions. So
But lesser numbers of regional superintendents.
lesser number of regional superintendents. There'll now only be 35 rather than 44 in the state of Illinois, which is to be an approximate cost saving of about $1.5 million. Anytime you are looking at consolidation, if you take just a couple of small school districts and they look at consolidating, you understand the issues that are brought forth, much less when you are dealing now with, we have to have about 1/3 of the county boards in the state of Illinois pass resolutions for this reorganization of the regional offices of education. So we are pleased on two accounts. We, first of all, respect the fact that the governor acted and signed this legislation, which acknowledged that the regional superintendents and their offices continue to serve school districts and those families in the state of Illinois. We also acknowledge the very fact that we are in hard economic times, and there are cuts throughout all avenues of government. We would have rather had a similar cut of 10% rather than the deeper cut that we took. Okay.
100%.
Right, right. So,
which I'm sure when you were speaking of the governor late last year, it wasn't in such pleasant tones when you weren't being paid.
well, I've always tried to be on good terms with the governor. So,
yes. And that's a good thing as an elected official.
We have a long history. I've supported the governor on numerous initiatives in his past. This was one that we disagreed on.
Now, you are a one-time classroom teacher yourself, aren't you?
That's true. I taught in the Triad District for 28 years.
Right.
And know the work of day in and day out, being a classroom teacher, dealing with kids, and it's probably one of the highlights of my career, is many of the good experiences I've had. I have been very fortunate being regional superintendent. I became president of the Regional Superintendents last year, July 1st, the day after this veto. So my year as president of the superintendents was very dynamic and very involved in the legislative process.
Right here in this spot where we're sitting, 150 years ago, there were a series of one-room schoolhouses, right, with teachers who had been brought in from other places in the world that had had some education, and they were brought in by the parents for the purpose of teaching their kids, and these were farmers and business people, so that their children understood enough business so that they didn't get cheated, right? And they also learned language and reading so that they could read their Bible, right? That's basically what was going on in this area 150 years ago. Now, there's been this evolution in education, and we have kept consolidating more and more young people into single buildings.
That's very true.
Now, my question, therefore, is, as a classroom teacher, as a regional superintendent, do you think that this idea of constantly massing kids into a room to be lectured to by a teacher is the best model to be used in the education process?
In today's society, there are particular attributes that a school has to have to provide those children with the skills in today's world.
Well, the reason I asked that question is, for example, there was a program, and I forget what cable channel it was on, but there was a thing called How the States Got Their Shape. And it was a 2-hour special, and it was excellent. It talked about the United States from its very foundation as to the shapes of the early colonies, which turned to the states, and then later on, we know all the rectangles like Wyoming and Colorado and all that, and how that all occurred. Now, in a 2-hour period, they actually gave an entire discussion of the development of the United States from zero to where we are today, including how the Missouri Boot Heel actually got added on to territory which should have gone to the Arkansas Territory. In a 2-hour period, more territory or educational territory was covered than a lecture method could have been covered in, as far as I'm concerned, weeks of lecturing. So that's why I asked this question: is the lecture method, where teachers stand in front of a classroom, is the best methodology for communicating modern information into young people?
I say no. Okay, I'm a firm believer, and I think the new teaching framework, which is being advocated currently under the new Performance Evaluation Review Act, is engaged learning. I think when a child's engaged in learning...
What's the definition of engaged learning?
It's where a student is involved in participatory learning, okay? And I noticed that some schools are utilizing iPads today to engage students, which is a modern piece of technology.
Right.
Our children today are being born into a world in which they're engaged in, okay? Not talked to, okay? They have all different means of electronic medium that they utilize. So they live in an engaged world, okay? When a child goes to school and the only method of instruction is by lecture, and don't misunderstand me, everyone needs verbal instruction. Everyone needs guidance. But their actual engagement is I think where real learning takes place. And it's where critical thinking skills occur. Not that everything can be done by using, let's say, a computer, and I wouldn't want anyone to misunderstand that. But I think a child better learns science from seeing science real take place. And I think that this is what's really being understood by educational theorists today, that our next generation, to understand the complexity of our world, needs to be intricately involved in it. And where we look at our math scores, I think children better learn mathematics by doing math, being engaged in mathematical models, than they do just by listening to a teacher do problems in a class and do 10 as a study set. So when I speak of engaged learning, that's what I'm referencing.
Yeah, when you mention math, for example, I mean, it would be good for children to be taught that geometry was actually a development from, originally I believe, from Egypt, because the Nile kept washing away all the boundary markers of all that land in the flood, and they had to be able to go out there and resurvey the land, saying, no, this is mine, this is yours. And that's why these things don't just exist in the abstract. Math is there to actually do a function. But I find too often that students are taught the function, not the why.
Not the application, okay? And I think many children ask that question, and it's the favorite question a child asks: when am I going to use this in my life? You know, why is it important that why is it important that I understand that x equals 2 in algebra? Okay, where am I going to use this? And what I'm speaking toward of engaged learning, children understand that, and that becomes the focus. And what is taking place currently with the revised method by which we're looking at a new teaching framework for teachers to follow is that teachers will be looked at as to how well they do engage students in learning.
Now, there seems to be a tension within the teaching community over issues of first in, last out in terms of being laid off, and the newer teachers who are much more engaged in these methodologies that you're talking about, but they're put aside first. What can be done so that either the people who have been there a while change their methodology, or if they can't or won't, that they're the ones that go away and leaving the people who can actually do what you're suggesting?
Okay. Well, Lee, we all know that laws more or less dictate policy, okay, and school board policy. And a year ago, major legislation that was passed in the state of Illinois, which was Senate Bill 7, changed that, in which tenure and seniority no longer in the state of Illinois is the order for teacher dismissal. But it's the whole process that's being implemented, with the first part of it being before school starts this summer. and that's the understanding of the new evaluation system on performance of teacher evaluation. And it has a lot of people up in arms right now as to how this is going to be designed, how it's going to be delivered into the schools, okay? And that's why I had spoke just previously in our conversation about this new teaching framework. And it's important, and I recently met with some administrators in the Edwardsville district because, and I commend that district for the method by which they were training their administrators to understand how we're going to be looking at teaching in the classroom. And so for us to improve performance of teachers in the classroom, the instructional leader, who is the principal, has to know what they are looking for, and they have to know how to coach that teacher to do a better job.
And do they?
For the most part, I have to say yes.
Okay.
Okay. And that's the other idea behind the evaluation system. You know, often when a teacher would receive maybe needs improvement on evaluation, it would not be looked at as favorable. Okay. That is not necessarily the case. You know, I think all of us can improve at everything we do. Okay.
Yes.
If you are excellent at everything that you do,
you're a very rare person.
That's right. But when you look at teacher evaluations, for the most part, teachers were rated excellent. So if you're rated excellent, is there anything I need to do different? And as parents sometimes communicate, as the general public does, they see room for needs improvement. Okay. So I would explain it this way, that I think everybody can continue to improve, and your real evaluation is a subsequent evaluation to the year before as to whether you took the suggestions and you worked on your improvement. And that's what really makes you excellent, is by being able to continue to improve and deliver better instruction in the classroom.
Now, last time that you were here with us, we were having a discussion about funding new schools or improvements to school property. And I'm just wondering at this stage, and this is part of my original question, is the method that we use now of bringing all these students into these large buildings where they are, you know, put together in large groups, is this the method that you and your colleagues are thinking, let's just say 25 years from now? Okay, that's enough time to make some change in the system. Can you see over 25 years that being the same, or a more decentralized because of the methodology that you're changing the education process to, which seems more computer-based and therefore can be in smaller groups?
Well, as I look into the future, I think we're going to see education change in numerous ways. Okay. Bringing students into a centralized location for instruction has been done because of the best outcomes. I'm going to use that as the explanation, because there were not financial resources or human resources if you broke this apart in smaller pies.
Okay.
Now, let me say this. There are limits to growth, in which is too big, not good. Yes. If you have a population of students that exceed the instructional staff, and anytime you increase class size to a too large a limit in which you've got less than proper instructional time per student, you're going to lessen the quality of education. So just to continue to make schools bigger is not the answer. Okay. Everybody, I mean, and there's a debate as to what is the best class size. Okay, I really think 20 to 24 students is ideal. I'm speaking as a teacher. On a 48 to 50 minute period. And why? Well, if you just break that down equally, that gives you 2 minutes per child. Okay, which isn't a lot of time. But I always had a goal as a teacher, and I tried to talk to each student every day in all my classes. And that's a real task as a teacher, rather than just talking to the whole group. But getting to your question, how will things change in the future? How will, let's say, online education change? Okay, some people refer to this as the virtual school, and in some parts of our country, Florida being one, they're offering a host of educational opportunities through the virtual school in their public schools. More diverse offerings in language. For example, in our schools in Madison County, the language of Chinese, who is our biggest global partner, is not being taught. Okay, so how could we teach Chinese in Madison County schools? Okay,
you need to start with 3-year-olds.
That's right. Right. You notice I didn't say Madison County high schools.
Right.
I said Madison County schools.
Right.
So as we look at using virtual opportunities in our educational system, I think you'll see some changes brought into the classroom. Okay, and I think through the continuum of education, I think that we're going to see the nature in which instruction is delivered change. And I don't think the teacher is going to be looked as much at as you had mentioned, as a lector, but is going to be looked at as a facilitator. And is going to be looking at how we facilitate those opportunities for children to grow and learn, and whether or not age groups, we will always break children down in the age group populations in which they are currently. And there's something very exemplary that I'll share in this program. Southwestern Illinois College has looked at an initiative to allow 16-year-olds in high school to attend their campus while they're in high school, which is an early start program for those who are ready for that experience. So we could also begin seeing more children exiting high school onto college, receiving dual credit. Right now, dual credit is a one-way avenue in our schools. You attend high school, you get the dual credit from the college. Okay. This model shows that the child attends college, goes to a college class, receives high school credit for it, which is somewhat reverses the dual credit opportunity.
And they get the college credit too?
They get the college credit as well.
Okay.
College and high school. So you
what
could
classes would these be, like math classes,
they'd
science
be
classes,
math
labs?
classes, science labs, they would be English classes, history class, a regular course of study as you would begin college.
You know what, I just want to say we probably have about 5-7 minutes left. So anything that we need to discuss, make sure you jump in and cover it now. But what I wanted to say was I still attend classes at junior college, but it's very specialized work that I'm doing. But I have noticed that on this campus that when young people come there right straight out of high school, there is a huge contingent of these young people who have just come from high school who must go into remedial English. They actually didn't learn anything or I shouldn't say anything, but they didn't learn enough, yet they graduated, and they need remedial. Now, what is it that is going on that allows such a large number of students out of the high school building, and the first thing they have to do is catch up on what they should have learned in the first place?
Well, Lee, I'm going to address that in this regards, is that the community college gives an opportunity for all students to continue their education.
Right.
It doesn't say that...
I'm here.
I am too. And it doesn't say that all students will begin college at the same level. And that's the difference between public education and post-secondary education. Okay, so if you want to participate in the post-secondary process, you eventually have to get to a benchmark to earn those college hours. Okay, now I don't say that any student leaves any of our schools in Madison County without having learned anything. Okay, because I think they all leave our schools having learned a great deal.
Yes.
And I guess I'm somewhat defensive of public education, being a regional superintendent.
And a former teacher.
Because we deal with many issues today in our schools, helping students be successful with social, emotional issues, and provide them with opportunities to live a good life beyond all the academic rigor. Okay? Now, the other part is that in today's world, we look at everybody as being college material. Okay? When I graduated from high school, not everybody was looked at as being, the old term that I use is college material. So you didn't pursue that. But the hope and dream, the American dream that my child will go to college is been brought about, and that opportunity really is at the community college level. You know, we have students at the community college that never graduate from high school at all, and I deal with that population, and those are GED graduates. Those are the dropouts. So when you look at that community college population and students in remedial classes, part of the purpose of the community college is to pick up that sector of society that wasn't successful in high school and provide those educational opportunities. If that child is at a particular benchmark where they don't need those remedial classes, and they go ahead and enroll in college algebra and English 101, world civilization, and they make, there's a good portion of those children that are making the dean's list at those institutions as well, and that are transferring on to universities. And you know, we have a great deal of our young people that are leaving our high schools that are being accepted to very high-ranking institutions: the University of Illinois, University of Missouri, University of Arkansas, and I can go on and put the whole list.
But I will say, and we're down to the last couple of minutes here, but I will say that you aren't, and that's not your area of control, but East St. Louis and other school systems like that are not turning, or they're turning out some of the people I was referring to, more of them than perhaps in Edwardsville, Granite City, Collinsville, Alton school districts. And we as a society need to be concerned about why those kids aren't being brought up to standards, because if we don't get those kids up to standard, then we better build more prisons.
Well, we have a huge issue in many of our urban cities, okay, our urban schools, in graduation rates. Okay, and I'm proud that in Madison County our graduation rate's about 90%, okay, which is very high. If you just look
Go
across,
to St. Louis City.
Right, you're right at 50%.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, I will tell you that one thing that is being done in the state of Illinois, I think it's one of the most proactive measures to improve instruction in those schools, is that we have what are called turnaround school models, school improvement grants, that are targeted at the lower achieving school districts, in which an outside school improvement group works with that school administration to improve the quality of education at those institutions. And I think that's the model that helps to reform and reshape the way education is delivered where it's not being successful, because it often can't be done by just those who are there working in a particular culture, okay? So they need outside help and outside advisement.
This has been a really interesting and fabulous discussion. I want to thank you very much, Dr. Daiber, for being with us today.
Well, I'm always pleased to be a guest.
Well, thanks. To my audience, I've been speaking with Dr. Robert Daiber. He is the Superintendent of Schools for the Madison County, Illinois. As I said, a fascinating discussion. Hopefully you were with us for the whole time. Just wanted to let you know also that this will be available on YouTube. Thank you very much.